Hey, friend, welcome back to the Live Off Rent show, where we bring in real estate and other financial experts to help you build passive income, create your dream lifestyle, and reach financial independence. As always, I'm your host, Brian Davis, co-founder of Spark Rental, and I'm on this journey with you. Every month, we sit down, we vet different passive real estate investments in our co-investing club, and I am in there in the trenches investing alongside all of our audience members. So without further ado, I am super pumped to announce today's guest on the show. We have founder and CEO Dave Foster of the 1031 Investor. He is an Amazon best-selling author and qualified intermediary for 1031 exchanges. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, well, this is a great topic that so many real estate investors just don't understand. So let's start at the beginning, though. Before you were a 1031 exchange expert, before you were a real estate investor, how did you get into real estate investing in the first place?
I had my first child. My wife and I were both in regular careers. We had our first child, and all of a sudden life changed. We just thought we threw away the TV. We just wanted to look at this little thing. And we realized that the greatest commodity that we had in our lives was time. And while we could not get more time, you can always get more money.
Yeah.
We had to find a way to manage the time to maximize it. And that caused it caused somebody, I don't know, we all blame each other. Someone said, let's just invest in real estate. It'll be easy, right? And from there, we embarked, and that's exactly what we did. I bought a duplex in Denver, Colorado. I fixed it up. I rented it out, and then I sold it and made what I thought was a truckload of money until my accountant told me at the end of the year that I was going to have to write a check for $30,000.
Oh,
I said, wait a minute. That put our whole timeline of maximizing time, because we decided what we were going to do was buy a sailboat and sail away and raise our children on a boat. I know, weird dream for a Kansas farm boy and a Minneapolis city girl living in Denver, but for some reason, that's what we chose. Just the tax by itself made us realize that it was going to put our plans so far behind. And that was when I discovered the 1031 exchange. So it's really, my whole career has been a product of my self-learning. Just like you said, you're in the trenches investing with your people. I know and love these things because of what they did for us. And what the 1031 exchange let us do was, for the next 10 years, every time we would sell a piece of investment real estate, we used a 1031 exchange. We sold it. We bought more real estate, investment real estate, and did not have to pay tax in the middle. Periodically, we would sell a primary residence, and that falls into the primary residence rules. Right. So that money was tax-free. Well, the tax-free money went to the buy the boat kitty. The tax-deferred dollars went to our portfolios in Connecticut and in Florida. And 10 years to the date, we bought a 53-foot sailboat. We sailed away and cruised around with our 4 kids for 10 years, living off the rents from our short-term rentals that had been 1031 into Cape Coral, Florida. That's what I was just talking about.
Yeah. So before we hit the record button, I was telling Dave that I was just in Cape Coral, Florida last weekend, up from Peru, because my sister got married there. So, and Dave is in St. Petersburg, Florida, not too far away from Cape Coral. So, so Dave, there's so much that you just covered there that we have to dive deeper on. So first, I mean, I want to spend a lot of time talking about you guys living on a sailboat for 10 years with 4 kids. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts. First of all, you mentioned the homeowner exclusion, which is also known as the Section 121 exclusion. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, for single people, your first 250 grand in profits are tax-free when you sell a primary residence. Now, Dave, will you go ahead? You tell us the rules for occupancy and yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder here.
Brian, it's the greatest investment tool for anybody, because all you've got to do is buy a house and live in it. And once you've lived in it for 2 years out of the 5-year period before you sell it, as a single individual, you're absolutely right. You get $250,000 of profit tax-free, doubled if you're married.
Right. So $500,000 in profits if you're married.
Here's what's crazy is you can do that once every 2 years.
Right.
So literally, you could live tax free off of these sales for the rest of your life if you're willing to move that often.
Yeah. And every 2 years, it's not undoable, or it is a lot, but I mean, there was a time when I moved every 3 months when I was dating a travel nurse, and we spent a couple years bouncing around the country. So, you can do it.
Absolutely.
Um,
It doesn't. NAR, I think, the National Association of Realtors, says that people stay in their houses generally 5 to 8 years. So just by itself, if that's all you do, there's 8 or 9 opportunities during your life to take
and
that
you can
money tax
use
free.
homeowner mortgage loans, right? You can use owner occupied mortgage financing with a
Much better
very
financing.
small down payment and a low interest rate, or at least, relatively low compared to investor loans. So I love that. That's something that my partner Denny and I occasionally talk about. And of course, you can do that with house hacking too. So you could buy up to a 4 unit property, move in with a homeowner mortgage with a low down payment and a low interest rate, move into 1 unit, rent out the other 3 units, still make a profit and cash flow every month. So you're living for free plus getting cash flow. And then after 2 years, sell it, tax capital gains tax free, or keep it as a rental, and move out and just
Inside
do it all
now,
over again.
you ready to throw some gasoline on that?
Please.
Yeah. So with the house hack, what you're actually doing is you're living in one and you've got three that are investment. So when you sell that property, 1/4 of that's going to be tax free if it's a fourplex, because that's where you're living. The other three, you can 1031 exchange into a new fourplex.
There you go.
Live in 1 unit, rent the other three. Dude,
Well,
it's crazy.
so a lot of people aren't familiar with 1031 exchanges. So for anyone who's not familiar, Dave, walk us through first, like the 30,000 foot view of what it is and the reason to do it. And then let's get a little bit more granular in some of the rules and requirements for people considering doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it really is for the investor. It's a simple process of selling investment real estate and buying investment real estate, just like you normally would. But as long as you, first of all, you have to use a qualified intermediary. That's someone like me because you can't do it yourself.
Right.
IRS requires that third party. So as long as you use a qualified intermediary, follow the steps in the process, and purchase at least as much investment real estate as you sold, you get to indefinitely defer paying tax on all the gain and all the depreciation that you've taken up to date. It's that powerful. And I do mean indefinitely, because as long as you own that new property, you never pay the tax. As long as anytime you sell that property, you do another 1031 exchange, you'll never pay the tax. Here's where it gets really crazy. You can convert one of those investment properties into your new primary residence.
Oh, and then qualify for the Section 121 exclusion,
Yeah,
the
now you
homeowner
only get a
exclusion.
proration, you don't get the full thing, but yeah, you can eliminate. That was part of what we did, is we positioned our rental portfolio to Connecticut ahead of us moving there. When we moved there, we moved into one of our investment properties, which let us take all of the profit from our primary residence sale and put it in the buy the boat fund. And then we did that again. So you can convert and then slowly eliminate some of the gain. And here's the second best option of all. It's not my favorite, but you can die.
Right.
And when you die, your heirs are going to get that profit, the property, as if they paid market value. It's called a step up basis.
Right.
And
So
the tax literally disappears.
yeah, so the cost basis just right, your low cost basis when you bought it disappears, and it becomes the new property value is the new
That's
cost basis.
exactly
So
right.
there's no capital gains tax. Yeah, so I mean, I've known investors who just kept all their properties, or their last set of properties from a 1031 exchange, as retirement income, right? And then when they lived on those rents all through retirement, and then when they kicked the bucket, they're the cost basis disappears and their kids inherit them basically tax free. So yeah, I love it. It is one of the only ways to stiff Uncle Sam and not actually pay those taxes, right? So Dave, before we talk about exactly what you did and your strategy and living on the boat, I just want to clarify for people, there are some timeline rules around 1031 exchanges. So walk us through those rules as far as when you have to declare the replacement property after you selling the old one, when you have to actually buy the new property.
Sure.
Because yeah, when people first learn about 1031 exchanges, they want to understand some of those nitty gritty rules.
Sure. So it's going to start with the closing of the sale of your old property. So it's kind of the exact opposite of the normal investor mindset, which is I buy, then I sell. This starts with your sale. And of course, remember the qualified intermediary has to be involved prior to that.
Right.
From that closing of that sale, you've got 45 more days to identify your potential replacement property. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have it under contract. You simply have to identify it in writing. But on day 46, that list can't be changed anymore.
Right. But you can declare up to
You're
three, right? Three options.
You can
Since
declare up to three, and it doesn't matter what they're worth.
right, and shit happens in real estate, right? So like, yeah, I mean, because yeah, so that's why the IRS does give you the chance to declare up to three options.
Yeah, you can actually declare more than that, but then it becomes there's some valuation issues that come into play. But in general, if people are looking to buy a bigger property than they sold, three identifications all you get. The reason why it's going to kind of be irrelevant beyond that, anyways, is that in today's market, what are the odds that you negotiate on the first property, take it all the way to maybe inspection, and then it falls out? You're now 3 weeks into that, and then you go back to property number two. What are the odds that that property is still going to be there?
Right.
So it's one of those things where you just kind of want people freak out over the 45 days because it feels short. It's not as short as it feels. And you do want to try to get it under contract during that time.
Right.
Now, here's a hack for people that they often don't realize, and that is that you can go into contract for your new property before your old property closes. Well, that's going to buy you another 30 or 45 days.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you got 3 months to go find a property, and that's usually pretty doable.
Yeah.
You have a
And
total of
that's a great
180
tip, by the way.
days to close on it. That's the other timing rule.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that people heard that. So within 180 days of your the old property selling, you have to actually close on the new property. So two timelines to be aware of. One, you have to declare the new property you're planning on buying, up to three options for new properties that will replace the old property within 45 days of the old property selling. And then you have to actually buy one, actually close on one within 180 days of the old property selling. So Dave, let's talk a little bit more about exactly what you guys did in building up your portfolio of income properties and some of the hacks that you did, and then how you ended up living on the boat for 10 years with your four kids.
Well, what we decided was that we were, although I'm that adrenaline fix and flip junkie. I've got to have one of those going, right? The problem is fix and flips don't qualify for 1031 exchanges
Right.
because your intent is to resell them. So what I had to do was modify my business plan a little bit so that instead of fixing and flipping, which I love to do, I would fix, we would backfill with a renter, and then we would refinance, and then we would take the refinance money to go buy my next flip project. And that was how we compressed the time frame
So like the
and
BRRRR
started to
strategy,
escalate things.
the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat strategy, where you pull your
Exactly.
initial down payment back out of one property after you renovate it and take it and just recycle the same down payment again and again.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then with this addition, that when we were ready to leave Denver to go find some sort of ocean to sail on, we moved first to Connecticut. And so ahead of that, we 1031'd our portfolio into several properties in Connecticut. So we had our investment portfolio right there waiting for us. As we left Denver, we sold our primary residence. That money was tax free. But rather than use that money to go buy another primary residence, we converted one of our investment properties into our next primary residence
In Connecticut.
in Connecticut. And then lived there long enough that we did the exact same thing, moving our portfolio to Florida ahead of our going down there. sold our primary residence in Connecticut, again, tax free, and then moved down to Florida where we got the boat.
Now, you mentioned doing multiple 1031 exchanges. So clarify for our audience, can you do several of these in the same year, with different properties? How does that work?
Absolutely. Every transaction is going to stand on its own. And the key to it all simply is that you are selling investment property. That's what the term like kind means, is that it is real estate. All real estate is like kind. So whether it's commercial, industrial, residential, land, it's all the same thing. It's real estate. All that matters is you are selling like kind, meaning real estate. And then the second phrase is that has been used with qualified as qualified use. Qualified use means that your intent was to hold it for productive use in business, trade, or for investment. Now, the key productive use could mean rental, but it also could mean the building that I keep my restaurant in. I'm using it as part of my trade. Or it could mean long-term appreciation. I buy a piece of land and let it sit until progress catches up. All of that's qualified use. What is not qualified use, if it's my primary residence, that doesn't qualify,
Right.
or if my intent was not to hold it. So it doesn't matter how many pieces of real estate it is. Each one, if it meets those two criteria, you can do a 1031 exchange on. So that was why we backed up with the refinances, so that we would do multiple exchanges in a year. I've got clients that do the same model that will, oh my gosh, they'll do 20 or 30 exchanges a year.
Wow.
Every property they've owned for more than a year because they've been refinancing and building them up. And one of the cool things about 1031 is that when we're talking about number of exchanges, number of properties, is that the 1031 exchange is going to allow you to meet and adjust to whatever the market is telling you. Like when we all start out generally with less money and brains than energy, we go buy a single family rental and we start becoming landlords.
Right.
Well, I've got 7 or 8 or 9 of those backed up, and I realize I'm tired of all the tenants.
Oh, yeah.
And the market is telling me, Dave, you can buy multifamilies very cheap. So I would sell, say, 7 of those and combine them, do what's called a consolidation exchange. 7 different sales and exchanges of single family properties used to buy one much larger multifamily property.
Ah, that's a key point that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of real estate investors don't know that you can do that, that you could take 5 different $200,000 single family rentals, sell them, and buy $1 million multifamily property as part of a 1031 exchange. Now, does the timing of that sounds complicated though?
That one's just a little tricky, but only because you've got to bunch those sales close enough that each of the sales will meet the timeline to purchase
Right.
the new property. So, but where we'll see people do this on a small scale is like with new construction. They've got maybe 3 or 4 single family homes. They want to sell them all. They want to get out of the capital expense risk game. These are older properties they own. So they're thinking, I want to buy this fourplex that's being built, but it's a year out. So what they're going to do is they're going to wait till that is within 4 or 5 months of being done. And then they're going to execute the sale of their old properties. And as long as they bunch them close enough together, it works perfect. A little more hair raising, but it's not too bad. And of course, the opposite is true as well. And that can be just as lucrative for investors. Sell one property, like maybe I bought a property for 200,000 and it's now worth 400,000. Well, I could sell it and I could go buy another $400,000 property, but maybe a $400,000 property rents for $3,500 a month. A $200,000 property rents for $2,000 a month. So why not sell the $400,000 property and go back and buy 2 $400,000 properties?
It's a great tip. It's a wonderful tip. Now, is there a minimum holding period for this? I mean, could you hold a property for just over a year, for example, so that it qualifies for long-term capital gains, and then 1031 exchange it? Or does the IRS kind of frown on that as it looks like you didn't have the intent to hold it long term?
Yeah, no, there actually is no statutory holding period. But the year that you mentioned is what just about everybody feels comfortable with. Anything more than a year, because capital gains feels longer term, right?
Right.
And there's some case rule out there that says 2 calendar years, 2 tax years. It's really a gray area where they've chosen to simply say that it's a question of your intent and how you can establish it. My favorite investor of all time sold a property after 3 months. And I challenged him. I said, "What are you doing?" He was he'd done a bunch with us. I said, "You intended to flip this?" He goes, "No, I didn't. I meant to hold it. I had to honor the lease of the long-term tenant in my purchase agreement because it was a friend of the seller." I said, "Well, you're selling it now. So how does that demonstrate your intent?" He said, "It was the bear." I said, "What?" There was a bear that had moved in to the trash can of the house. The tenant did not feel comfortable taking the trash out. So she
I guess I
vacated the
understand.
lease. He did not want to mess with a bear. And the best thing of all, the accountant, we had a phone call, and the accountant said, "Dave, we've got the ring door photographs of the bear. We're putting them in a file, and just let the IRS come and test us."
All right.
It's all about what your intent is.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, I want to hear a little bit more about you guys living on a boat and living off of your rental income with these properties that you had 1031 exchanged. So, how many properties? Like, how did that all work?
That was one of the things I've been asked this a few times because everybody, so many people, it's like 150 doors, 500 doors. What do I need to get to? It's not how many doors, it's how they perform. And we literally had 5 very upscale waterfront rentals in Cape Coral
In
that were
Cape
all
Coral, all right.
sailboat access. As you're familiar with that, there's 400 miles of canals that all lead out to the ocean. And if you get the ones that aren't cross any bridges, we actually had the ability to, if any one of them was open and we happened to be back in town, we just pull our sailboat up to the back, throw a duffel bag into the house, and there was our own vacation.
Yeah.
But we did short-term vacation rentals. We were doing this at a time when, after we had been in business for a couple of years, this company called VRBO started. That's how long ago this was. And we were actually on their front page. So the old days of the video, the vlogs of showing anchorages, all that stuff, we were there at ground zero. And so we did weekly rentals. And then because each of the houses had docks, we chose to put boats there and rent the boats separately, but require a boat rental during peak times. So we were actually getting as much in boat rental as we were in house rental.
And was that an insurance nightmare? I mean, renting out these boats to tenants?
It was actually so much easier than you would think. We had to have certain standards. We had to have a licensed captain who checked them out, checked them in. I mean, certainly insurance costs money, but it wasn't anything that was crazy. And we literally did have one claim when some people went out right after a hurricane and flipped their boat on the beach. And it all got taken care of. It just wasn't nearly as, I know that the fear factor, right? Of, oh my gosh, what do I have at risk?
Well, yeah, I have the images of the tenants going out with a cooler full of beer and whiskey one night and, and crashing the boat, and then you have a total nightmare on your hands. But
Yeah, I think it was 2004. We had some tenants from England, and my wife had actually evacuated. She went to Orlando, and she said, "You're an idiot, but you stay here. That's fine." So I was staying there so I could watch the boat. And 2 hours before the hurricane hit, it wasn't supposed to come to Cape Coral. And it literally made a right turn, and we could not find our tenants. They had been out on the boat because right before a hurricane comes, it's beautiful.
right, oh yeah, it's all
And we got a
still
call and
and
they said, "Dave, we're
yeah.
really scared now. What are we supposed to do?" So we had to go run and get them, ran them to the shelter, got there about 5 minutes before the hurricane hit. Yeah, those are the things that make you question your desire to be a short-term landlord.
Right. All right. Well, I love that. I want to be mindful of your time here, but do you have any final tips or for that matter, anecdotes or stories about what people can or should be thinking about with, living off of their rents and
Yeah.
not paying capital gains taxes on them?
Well, I guess I would say just like the 1031 can be used for any place where the market tells you, it can be used anywhere in your personal life cycle to accommodate what you want. And when I think about living off rents, the key word there is living. What does it mean to live? Not survive, not have a job, but what does it mean to really live and use my rentals to do it? For us, it was achieving a lifetime goal of a sailboat. For someone, it might be an RV. For someone else, it might be the freedom to pursue whatever their hobbies are. Well, wherever you're at in your cycle of life, you can use the 1031 to structure it so that your rents really will allow you to live. And I highly encourage it. I tell people all the time, if they say, is there a regret you have? I said, yeah, that I didn't do it 10 years earlier.
Well, I
So
love
that's
that.
the key.
You're speaking my language here, especially as someone who spends most of the year overseas and does a lot of traveling. Totally speaking my language here. And I love the fact that you guys lived for 10 years on a boat with your kids, and especially with four kids. That I can only imagine how much fun and occasionally how trying that must have been.
The statute of limitations is over now, but the greatest thing we ever figured out was how to do timeouts, right? How do you sit a kid out in timeout on a boat?
Right.
We learned that all we had to do was throw him in the dinghy and then tow the dinghy behind the sailboat. And then we would just listen, and in about 3 minutes, the yells and screams turned to laughter and they were splashing each other. It was a good time.
I believe it. So, Dave, if someone is interested in doing a 1031 exchange, they need a custodian or a qualified intermediary to hold their funds. How can they connect with you?
The best place is simply to go right to the1031investor.com. We've got a YouTube channel. Love for people to come and subscribe to, because we're adding videos to that every week. I think we've got like 47 or 48. And links to my book on Amazon, Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth, The Real Estate Investor's Guide to the 1031 Exchange, which also we tell our story in there as well as a bunch of different case stories of just regular people like us that used different ways to create their own living.
Well, I love that. Dave, thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll have to have you back soon.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. If you enjoy these conversations that we have, please rate, review the show. Means the world to us. And we will catch you this time next week. Same place, same time. Have a great week in the meantime.
Like the idea of diversifying into real estate, but don't want the headaches of being a landlord? Enter passive real estate syndications. You buy fractional ownership in apartment complexes and other large-scale properties. Earn your share of rental income and your share of the profits when the property sells. In fact, most of the syndicators we've invested with have averaged returns over 20% per year. You even get full tax benefits, including accelerated depreciation. Even as you collect distributions in real life, you often report a loss on your tax return. So why doesn't everyone invest in real estate syndications? First, you typically need to know the syndicator to invest, and the minimum investment for each property is high, usually $50,000 to $100,000. That's a lot of money for a single investment, which is precisely why we formed an investment club to pool funds and invest together. Every month, we propose a new deal in the co-investing club and vet it together on a group call with the syndicator. Each deal is purely optional. Pass or invest as you like. As for us, we invest our personal money alongside you in every single deal. If you want to invest like the 1% without actually being a 1%er, join Spark Rentals Co-Investing Club. Email us at support@sparkrental.com with questions, and we look forward to investing alongside you.